Hello and welcome to the Common Hour. My name is Rachel Anderson-Rayburn and I'm chair of the Common Hour Committee and Associate Professor of Theater. I'd like to introduce our ASL interpreter, Cindy Mees. Thank you, Cindy. And please note that if you need to adjust your screen view to include Cindy as you watch, you can try different screen display modes via the small view box towards the upper right of the Zoom window. A reminder that the Common Hour Committee is currently accepting proposals from faculty, staff, and students for Fall 21 remote Common Hours. The deadline is 12 noon on Monday, March 22nd, which gives you 11 days. And we encourage you to consider submitting events you might otherwise plan as a department, house, or other small events as Common Hour events. Let the Common Hour platform help you grow your audience. During today's event, Zoom viewers can submit questions for our speaker via the Q&A feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Please identify yourself as an FPS member or a student. We won't use anyone's name. We'd like to note that today's presentation is the third international speaker we have had in a row. One of the few advantages to remote presentations is the enhanced ability to bring live speakers in from faraway places. And we appreciate guest presenters who join us at their dinner time, as today's speaker is doing from Benin. Immediately after today's event, a couple of us from the Common Hour Committee will be available to any students who have questions about proposing a Common Hour in a drop-in info session immediately following this presentation at 2:30 p.m. We are posting the Zoom link for today's info session in the chat, and all students have also received it in last Friday's weekly email about the Common Hour. As Module 3 comes to a close, the Common Hour will take a 2-week break until March 31st, when Professor Amelia Rouser, Associate Dean of the Faculty, Professor of Art History, and 2020 Dewey Award recipient, will present a talk entitled, "Why Are You Wearing That? Lessons from the 18th Century." Our virtual pizza server group today is the African Caribbean Association. The ACA is committed to proudly portraying the diversity of African and Caribbean countries to increase cultural awareness at FNM. We welcome all students with open arms to join us as we engage in activities that not only serve to educate all individuals, but that celebrate the inquisitive cultures of African and Caribbean countries. This module, we are meeting bi-weekly from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. via Zoom. So look out for our emails to hear more details and join our mailing list. Follow us via Instagram at FNM_ACA to hear more about our events. And now I would like to introduce Professor Dan Ardia, Professor of Biology and the proposer of today's Common Hour.
Thank you, Rachel. So I'm honored today to introduce our speaker, Marie-Cécile Zinsou. Ms. Zinsou is a French-Beninese art historian and public voice on contemporary art, art restitution, and art education. She has a long family history of politicians and intellectuals in the Republic of Benin in West Africa. In 2005, Ms. Zinsou founded the Fondation Zinsou to create a space for dialogue between artists and the public, and has since then been a leader in cultural, educational, and social initiatives in Benin. As the foundation has grown, it has expanded into an art center with on-site and traveling exhibitions, along with extensive educational outreach. And a natural evolution was the establishment in 2013 of the Museum of Contemporary Art in Ouidah, the first museum of contemporary art in Benin. The foundation is particularly focused on engaging in education of youth in its 2 museum spaces, as well as through operating libraries across Benin. Ms. Zinsou is a public intellectual, for example, being featured in Apollo magazine, the World Policy Conference, and in multiple interviews with European and African television shows. In 2014, the Fondation Zinsou was awarded a Young Artist Grant from the Japanese Art Association. And in 2014, Ms. Zinsou was made a Chevalier de l'Ordre des Arts et des Lettres. Due to her prominence as a voice for art in Benin, Ms. Zinsou has been involved in the movement to restitute art objects taken during colonialism, the topic on which she will speak today. Please join me in welcoming Marie-Cécile Zinsou to FNM Common Hour.
Well, hello everyone. I'm very happy to be with you today. I would have loved to be live with you, but I'm in Cotonou right now. It's very special for me to speak with you without seeing you, so I hope I will be as clear as possible. If you have any kind of questions, if I am not being clear, don't hesitate to tell me or to write it in the Q&A. Of course, as I don't see you, I don't see if, how you're reacting, and so I'll try to be clear and I'll try to explain myself, but really feel very free to ask any question if necessary. So I'm here to speak about restitution. Thank you very much, Dan, for the introduction. I just must tell you that I'm both French and Beninese. So I come from Benin, this very little country between Nigeria and Togo in Western Africa. It's important to know that both my families come from both countries, because it's a real question in this restitution matter. When I speak, people always ask me if I speak for France or for Benin, and I must admit I am more of an African speaker on the subject. I'll try to tell you a long history and make it 45 minutes, as I've been asked. And I will start by telling you that this story we're going to speak about has no real beginning and has no seeable end. So what exactly are we talking about? Benin, in 2016, the president of Benin decided to ask France to give back the looted art that is in the French collection. So from this, let's go back to 1892. In 1892, the French colonial troops invaded the capital of the kingdom of Dahomey. Dahomey was the name of Benin at the time. It was a kingdom that had been involved majorly in the slave trade, and it was a rich kingdom and going at war most of the time, and with a very strong economy based on slave trade and agriculture. And the particularity of this kingdom was that it was very difficult for French people to colonize it. Instead of taking 3 or 4 months in colonization, it took 4 years. The French invaded the capital in 1892, but they didn't find the king there, and it took 2 more years to find the king. So Dahomey has been the focus of French attention, because every week in every newspaper you could hear about Dahomey and what was happening there, because nobody could expect that France, a very glorious nation, couldn't beat a very small kingdom in Western Africa. It had never happened before. So in 1892, the troops arrived in the royal palace, and the king has burnt most of the city, but the French troops arrive in the palace and take everything they can find. So they take the doors of the palace, they take the thrones, they take most artifacts. And you have to know that Benin has a royal court art, which is very important. So every king in Benin has ordered to artists, and they have bought a lot of art. And this art has been shown to the population since 18th century. All the population in Benin in Dahomey, comes every year in the palace once a year, and they get to see the heritage, and they get like history lessons, what we call panligon, which is the way history has been taught in Dahomey for the 200 last years. It's kind of a novel in verse that people recite under the trees at night, and that, like this, everyone knows about the king and the court and what has happened during the last centuries. So French arrive and take everything they can. They put it back on the boats, and everything is brought back to France. What is happening to the objects there? Most of them the most important ones are going to the Trocadero Museum, where they're going to be shown, and almost presented as, a triumph, because, it's this country that has been France has been fighting for a few years. And so when they show the objects to French people, it's a way to show the power of France and how every African country is gonna fall in front of the colonial troops. So parts of the objects are in the museum, and some objects are sold to finance the colonial troops, and some other objects are kept by the soldiers' family. Until today, you still have families of colonial soldiers who have objects in their collection. So Benin, let's go back to Benin 2016. Benin decides to ask France for the looted objects. It's kind of very new, and also it has happened since the 60s. We've been independent, as most of the neighbor countries. We've been independent since 1960, 1957 for some, or 1963 for others, but almost every country of the West African region have become independent around the 60s. So some countries have asked, and we must admit that Queen Elizabeth of England has given back a throne to Ghana in 1957. And Kinshasa, the Congo-Kinshasa, the Zaire, has been fighting since 1960 to get back their collection. But finally, in 1974, they received 144 objects. And I have to tell you a little about European collections at this point, because we don't really know what we're speaking about in terms of number until we understand what is in Africa and what is in Europe. So to give you an idea, almost no museums in Africa have more than 3,000 objects in their collection. So that's a fact. In Benin, we have 2,500 in our national collections today. If you look at the French collections, you have 90,000 objects in the French collections about Africa, probably around 7,000, 5,000 for Dahomey. In England, you have almost 70,000. Belgium has 180,000. And so I can go on like this for a long time. Almost all African heritage is in Europe. And it has been like this for the last 130 years almost. So it's one of the specificity of the restitution problem in Africa. It's this unique situation. What I like to give as an example is, for example, Mexico. If you're a French museum, or if you're an American museum, let's say you're a museum in Philadelphia and you want to organize an exhibition about Mexico, then you ask Mexico to lend you some objects for your exhibition. You can also, of course, ask Paris or Berlin or London. You can ask the European countries, but everyone can lend some objects for your exhibition. If now you want to organize an exhibition about Gabon, which is a country in Central Africa. If you want to organize a beautiful exhibition with Gabonese heritage, well, the only place where you can find this Gabonese heritage is France, majorly, a little London, and a lot Berlin. But you will never find anything in Gabon. In Gabon, everything has been taken away. So here we are at the beginning of the 21st century with African countries who have almost no heritage, and Europe was everything. And there you have this weird situation where you ask the French museum directors why they keep all our heritage and why we couldn't get any back. And they tell you, French people have invented the concept of museums and of universal museum, encyclopedic museums. So you are very lucky to have Dahomean objects in our collections, because first we keep them better than you, and then we can show your culture to the world. Which has been the thing that has been said for the last 60 years. but which today seems a little poor as a reasoning, and to think that only French could keep our heritage and that we wouldn't be able to do it. Because at this time, I must tell you that when Congo-Kinshasa asked for some objects back to Belgium in 1974, they got 144 objects. And those objects were for some sold, for some others stolen. And so now everyone tell us, every time we ask, everyone tell us, well, actually, we would love to give you back your object, but it's not possible because, you know, we already did in 1974. And even if Kinshasa is obviously, I think, 3,000 kilometers away from here, from Benin, well, we gave back to Kinshasa and everyone, and all the objects were stolen and lost. So you don't deserve to keep your own heritage because obviously you're not able to keep it. So that's one of the things, you know, that makes us arrive to 2016, and Benin asks. Benin asks for the heritage. It hasn't been asked for years because France is always saying no. France is saying no for a reason, because the French national heritage is inalienable. Oh no, I won't say it. Sorry, my English is a little poor. What I mean is that once an object has arrived in the French national collection, it can never go away. So you can never sell any national collections. You cannot give them away. Once something has entered the French national collection, it's there forever. So that's what we've always been answered since the 1960s when we were asking to get our heritage back. People were telling, sorry, but the law is very clear and there is no way to change the law. So what happened in 2016? Benin asked, and well, obviously they said no. So this didn't change. But one thing was different. The president in 2016 was almost had almost finished his mandate. So in 2017, a new president arrived, and this president had been working in his youth in Nigeria. So he had been living in Western Africa and been confronted to the fact that the museums are empty and that you have no way to learn about your culture and your past. It's very, very difficult to have an access to your culture if you have no museum for the people. So he knew about that. And probably there were other reasons like diplomatic reasons and probably others that I'm not aware of, but he did a speech which is very important in the European conversation about restitution. He did a speech in Ouagadougou in November 2017. And he said, I can't accept that African heritage is in France today. I think that from now and within the next 5 years, African heritage should go back to Africa. And so this was a very big surprise. But what you have to know in France at that time is that he had just been elected and the parliament had just been elected too, and he had a majority at the parliament. So obviously when he said, I'm going to change the law about heritage, the French heritage, well, in Western Africa, we started to believe him. And it was so new. It was the first time someone said, I can see that the situation is not proper. And he said another thing. He said, I consider colonization as a crime, which was a major scandal in France, where people, conservative people, tend to think colonization is a glorious part of the French history and that we should not be ashamed because France has brought all those important things in Western Africa, like the trains, the roads, the hospitals, and not considering what a crime colonization has been. So the president said, it's going to come back and I'm going to stay for 5 years. So I'm going to make sure you can get your heritage back in the next 5 years. This was very, very new, and this was a very big victory. I'm speaking a lot about this matter on my social networks, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, and we had a reaction that I think, surprised everyone. Even the French president was aware of the reaction when I commented on the new speech I had done and how he promised that heritage would come back, and everything was, well, people were very, very motivated. And there I have to come back again in the past. I have to come back in 2006. I created my foundation in 2005 because I was confronted to the fact that there were almost no museum in my country, neither in my region. And I felt that it's very difficult to grow in a globalized world without having a tool like the museum and like libraries to be able to create your culture and your own personal history. And you need to understand your heritage and you need to be exposed to creation. Everyone is. I mean, in a globalized world, it's not acceptable that I, as a child raised in France, I had every access to my culture, but that being raised in Benin means you have nothing. So I created this foundation in 2005 with a big exhibition space, very modern one, to be able to receive African artists and artists from all over the world, really, but people who wanted to exhibit in Africa and people who wanted to share what they were creating with a very young audience, and people who had no possible access to their culture because they can't just fly to see museums everywhere in the world. And so people, you have to come to them and give them this success. So I created that in 2005, and in 2006 I had an interesting opportunity. The French president of that time said that he wanted to create a new museum about the extra-Occidental arts, African arts, Asian arts, South American arts, everything that is not in the traditional art history of Occident. And he said that it was important for African people to have access to their heritage, but he didn't tell us that we were getting it back, but he said it should be exhibited in Africa. And this, in 2006, was very, very modern. And so he said, okay, let's try to do it with one country and let's choose Benin. Once Benin was chosen, they had to find a museum that could answer every technical questions, every conditions of the French national museums to be able to receive the French collections. And my museum was chosen at that time. And so I had the chance, let's say, to exhibit the royal treasure of Abomey, the capital of Dahomey, the treasures that had been taken in 1892. And I showed this exhibition called Béanzin, from the name of the king, of the last important king of Dahomey. I showed this exhibition for 3 months. During those 3 months, we had many visitors who had no idea about their history, who didn't know anything about the objects that we were showing, and who discovered everything. And people were very enthusiastic. Just to give you an idea, we received 275,000 persons during 3 months, just to show you how people were enthusiastic. And so everyone was very surprised. And in France, journalists were writing all the time about this exhibition, because they couldn't expect that people in Benin, not confronted usually to museum, would just go, everyone would go. People would come with their children, with their families, with their friends. Everyone was coming to see the object before they left. And after 3 months, in March 2007, people asked me, why exactly are these objects going back? Why can't we keep them? And why did we see them, but why are they going back to France? Because it's our history. It's very legitimate that we keep them and see them. And as a Beninese and French person knowing the French law, I told most people, we can't get them because it's too late. Now it's in the French collection. It has been for 120 years. We will never be able to get them back. And some people were asking already the objects to come back, but they were private person and families, and the French state don't even bother to answer those people. So there was no way. We had to send the objects back in France and stop the exhibition and tell to people, well, we're very sorry, but next time you want to learn about your history, maybe you can just ask a visa to the French embassy and take a plane ticket and fly 4,500 miles, and just to see your collection. It will probably cost around $3,000 just for you to be able to go and see what's your history about. So 2006 was something that moved people because nobody was expecting this level of interest, and people hadn't realized that it's not because we are poor, it's not because we are in Africa, it's not, we are like everyone else. We just want to know about who we are. And these objects, it's not that they have a very important monetary value. If you had to sell them, they wouldn't be very expensive, but they have the most important symbolical value for us. And so it's very, very important for the children here to be able to have access to them. So here we are back in 2017 with this president saying, okay, let's go. African heritage must go back. Well, people said, it's impossible. You can't change the law. And he said, well, I'm going to mission two persons, Bénédicte Savoy and Felwine Sarr, and who are two people coming from the university in Berlin and in Dakar. And we're going to ask them a mission about restitution and try to understand what solutions we can find today to find a way to give some heritage back to Africa. And Bénédicte and Felwine worked for 6 months, and they decided to question the origin of French collection. This was immensely unpopular because people were fearing that if we start to look at the African collection and if we start to give back to African countries, we'll have to look at the rest of the collection and we'll have to question the origin of the object. Which means if you give back a few objects to Africa, you will finally have to give back what you took in Italy, in Belgium, in Holland, in England. Well, what you took during all your history and during every war. So people were very frightened that Africa would ask everything back and that the museum would be emptied, and that European countries would ask back what had been stolen by the Napoleon troops at the beginning of the 19th century. So the mission said you should give back to Africa, and you should give back a lot to Africa because it's only fair, and we can't live as French people with a colonization history. We don't want to keep it alive, and we don't want to. We can change what happened after colonization, and symbolically giving back the object is a very good way to create a new relationship between France and the different countries of Africa. And the president didn't seem very happy when he got the report, but he said, okay, let's try. We're going to give back 27 objects, one to Senegal, which is an important historical object of one of the person who fought colonization. And we're going to give back the Abomey treasure to the Benin, to the ex-Dahomey. And so 2017, he said that, and people said, it's impossible, you can't. And he said, okay, we're going to change the law. We're going to change the law. We're going to have a new law, an exception law, only for Benin and Senegal, saying that, well, there is a transfer from France to two African countries. This was unseen. It never happened. It took a certain time, because we had to wait July this year for the law to be written. And after it was very, very fast because the law was voted in October and December, and the parliament voted it exactly as the president said. And so we are officially today the owners of our national treasure of Abomey, which is probably historically it's an immense triumph because it had never happened before. And the law is very specific when it's voted. So it was on the 24th of December of 2020. When the law is voted, the objects have 1 year to go back to their owner. So that means before next Christmas, the objects must come back to Benin. So I can tell you that this was not very well accepted in the public opinion in France. People thought it was treason from the president, that even the kings didn't do that, and that it was impossible to accept such a fact. But these are very conservative people, and they speak very loudly, but it's probably not representative of what the majority of people think. But in Europe, I just have to tell you what's happening in Europe now. In Europe, you have Germany, which has a very public, important debate about restitution, because Germany is very concerned about Cameroon, Egypt. They have a lot of things in their collection, and the countries who ask them the treasure back are very empty. So we have a very public debate, and universities are very important in Germany because the students speak a lot about the subject, which is not the case in France. The case in France, it's like a very small group of people. Everyone almost is against the project, and I'm very happy about it. But I mean, we are very, very few to be happy about it. There is a president and probably me. I don't know if there are so many more people happy about it. And then in England, you have the question of the British Museum and the polemic about the Benin bronze, which have no kind of link with Benin, the Republic of Benin. The Benin Kingdom and the bronze of the Benin Kingdom are from Nigeria. And so they have kept most of the royal treasure of Nigeria in London, and they, for the moment, they're very silent. They said they would accept a debate about should they keep the Nigerian treasures in England, but for the moment it's not very advanced. And in England, people fear that if Nigeria gets the bronzes back, Greece is going to start again with the Parthenon marbles, because every European countries, they have very long histories and they have stolen a lot of things through the years. And so in their collection, there are a lot of countries today asking for their heritage. So once having said that, now in Benin, we are quite excited because people are waiting for the objects to come back. Our museums are very old and not in very good conditions, but we are making an effort. We just asked officially, we started officially some new projects, some new museum projects in Abomey, the former royal capital. And some of the museums, the old ones that had been created by colonization, are being renewed in Ouida, next to my museum on the coast, in Ouida, which is a slave trade port, the important slave trade port, where almost 1 million persons left from Benin to the Americas. So we have now one space that will be ready at the end of the year, and one other space that will open in 2 or 3 years that will have good international museum conditions to receive the objects. But obviously people think that we will never make it, because people don't tend to look at history, and they don't understand that if their ancestors have been able to steal a collection from the 17th century in 1892, well, probably that means we're used to maintain our heritage, and that we'll probably be able to do it now. So today we are facing international press who is not very excited about us getting our heritage back. And in the country, we are facing people who are very excited, and I think we will show the world why it is so important, why this restitution is so important. And just here, maybe I have to tell you about why I fight for restitution. I don't think you fight for your past. I think you fight for your future. What I mean is that the objects coming back, it's just because we need them to understand who we are, because if we understand who we are, we can define where we are going. So that's why it's so important to get this heritage back. These objects, there's the support of our history, our memory. We have had very complicated histories because they've been erased. They've been erased by the French administration because they needed a reason to colonize us. So they had to say we were savages and we were not educated. And so to be able to prove that, they had to erase who we were and where we were coming from. So it's a very weird situation because they were in one way showing our collection in their museums and saying that we made beauty probably by chance, not by talent. And on the other side, they took all the beauty we created and took it off and said, well, you're no one and nobody's. So fighting for this object to come back, it's only 26, but it's 26, no, not 20, it's 26 coming back, but it's like, let's say 18 very important. 18 telling us who we are. The doors of the palace, for example, they tell our history. We didn't write our history in the 17th and 18th century. We carved it into the wood. So if you see the doors of the palaces, you will see some animals, you will see some symbols. Actually, you will see the way we wrote our history in the 18th and 19th century. So it's very important to be able to face those objects today and to show them to the next generation. Yeah, and so maybe, I don't know if I'm still on time. Not seeing you is complicated. I hope I'm not boring you, and I hope I've been clear. Tell me if you have any questions, or I think I've told you the most important dates and the fact that we are now waiting. And I don't know if you want to start questions now.
We have some questions we could begin with, sure. And folks watching, feel free to add more so that we can hear lots of different and new information from our speaker today. Thank you so much. Okay, so this first question is from a faculty member. Once you get the artifacts back this year, what are the next steps, both for promoting and caring for these items and for continuing to seek to have more of your heritage returned to you?
Well, this is a big question. What are we going to do with it? What we say to the French is we do whatever we want with it. That is very new because it's never been possible, and they've always been lending the heritage to us, but now it's a change. It's our heritage. So I hope that we will be able to open the renewed museum, and that we'll be able to care about the objects. It really depends on the governments, and we're a bit fearing the presidential elections here, and in 1 month we're a bit fearing what might happen. We hope there will be no violence and nothing that will make the arrival of the objects later, and so that's one of the questions for the moment. But I think we have professionals. We never lacked people. I mean, the people have always been very educated, they are good, they've been working in several places in the world. We have real curators, we have, you know, real competence in the museum field. Now, it's always the same. I hope the government is really going to care about the objects and that they're really going to be serious about it. And I've been promoting that idea for the last 6 years. I hope they will do the job, and if it's difficult for them, I think the civil society will help. So yeah, I think we're going to show the world that we can make it, and that it will help us. We're not going to attack the Metropolitan Museum to get what they have in their collection, because obviously they bought it, but even if it's been looted at the beginning. But what I mean is, what would be interesting for us is to have a dialogue. I mean, what would be great is that one day we can borrow some Hiroshi Sugimoto in Tokyo, or we can do a Mexican exhibition asking Mexico to lend us some artifacts. You see, that would be great, is that we show with the artifacts coming back that we are able to preserve them and show them in real museums. And then after, it would create a dialogue with the rest of the world, and Europe would stop looking at us as if we were still colonized.
This is a question from a student, and I may need some help with pronunciation from you, if you could help me with this. The student writes, I believe there was an activist by the name of Emery Diabanza. I may be butchering the name. I didn't say that, the student said that, but it's true for both of us. He walked into a museum, and I believe he took objects back physically. His goals were to bring the discussion of colonialism to the courts. How is activism constituted as political stunts helping France shift national dialogue? Or is this form of activism contributing to further resistance? How is activism in France contributing to restitution?
It's a very interesting question, and this man has done a lot of actions. He's been taking things in Marseille, I think in Aix-en-Provence. It's been going through most of the French museum, and not only the big Parisian museums that are very well known, but some of the province museums that maybe people know less, and they don't know that they have an African heritage in them. And he's always been living with the collections, which is a bit special because he was arrested every time. And last time he went to the Louvre, and in the Louvre he stole an object, but he got it wrong and he stole an Asian object. But I think that's not the question. The question is that this person is doing something obviously reprehensible. But what is interesting is that people have spoken about it a lot. When our president speaks about restitution and when he asks the reports and things, people don't really speak about it. You know, it's just a little line in the newspaper. When this guy enters the Louvre and goes out with some artifact saying, okay, it's mine, I'm just taking it back, just exactly the same way you took it first, this creates a real discussion. So I can't say it's good or whatever, but I must admit, this kind of action puts the restitution in the public debate. And it's been interesting, and I think there will be more, because as long as you have no official French people, except the president, that is speaking about the matter. And it's very complicated because you have a lot of French African person, just like me, who are mixed. And I mean, African history, West African history and French history have been so linked. They've colonized us almost all. So you can't just close your eyes and say that life is gonna go on. And, you know, you have to think about what happened. And so this person, I must admit, he makes it real, he makes it happen in the public debate. So I think he will be imitated, and yeah, I'm afraid he will start again.
This is a question from a faculty member. It's possible it's the faculty member who brought you here today. No comment. When your foundation does education with young people, what responses do you hear from children about the topic?
About restitution?
About your
Or about-
topic generally, not necessarily just restitution.
Okay, because with the foundation is mostly about contemporary art. So I try not to, I don't want to impose to people what I'm thinking about restitution. So I am trying not to speak too much about it in the context of our exhibitions, except if it has a link with our history. But when it's contemporary art, I try not to be too much. I don't want to impose my views upon the subject, but. Well, children are open. I mean, they are not frightened about contemporary art, but art in general. They're not frightened to ask. So that's why we have focused our programs on them since the beginning. Because when we opened the foundation, there were no contemporary art museum in Africa, not just in Benin. There was none on the continent. So I don't see if you can imagine, but the second one
Amazing to try to conceive of that.
Yeah, the second one opened in 2017. So now you have more today, and you have more projects, which is really good, but it didn't exist. So it didn't exist because when I opened, people told me the public is not interested, because if they were interested, they would, it would exist. And I was telling them, but you don't know if they're interested or not, because they can't ask you what they don't know. If you have, if you take the museum away from me, I've been to every museum all my life, it would be a big loss for me. But if you have never been to a museum, of course you can't know what you're losing. But just one number. 6.5 million person from 2005 to today. 6.5 million person, that's the people who came to visit our exhibitions. It's just to give you an idea. We are 12,000 in the country. So that gives you an idea of the engagement of the population, and the children are our first visitors. We are a very young country because half of the population is under 17. So that's a fact you have to know, but that's why also we were focusing on children. It's because they're around us, and they're our future, and they are the people of Benin.
It's amazing. I didn't know that. Thank you for that fact. Thank you. This is another question from a faculty member. The faculty member expresses great thanks for your talk, first of all, and then asks if you would speak to the similarities and differences between your restitution efforts and those of other former colonies and those of Jewish families looted during World War II. Is the French government more willing to restitute art to Jewish individuals, or does it still uphold the law about objects once in the French national collection staying in France? Do you see differences that might be explained by colonialist or racist attitudes?
Well, maybe I should have started by that. And that's why I've talked to you about Benin and Dahomey. And I tried to give you a few examples, but I never linked our history of restitution to other countries. Because the restitution, that's why I said at the beginning that it's a story that has no beginning and that has no end. Because it's every country is asking restitution for every time of their history. And we have plenty of examples. I think the most famous one is the Greek asking back the Parthenon marbles. But you also have Korea asking back for the manuscripts. And you have Nigeria asking for the bronze. And you have Ivory Coast asking for the royal artifacts of the Akan courts. And you have so many histories, and none of them is similar. the way the British have stolen the bronzes in the Oba court in Nigeria in 1893 has nothing to do with the way the French colonial troops came to Abomey in 1892. And so that's why I made no parallel, and I'm being very careful to make no parallel ever with the Jewish spoliation, because it's not the same law, it's not the same, laws about heritage are very different. You have a specific law in France for the Jewish spoliation, and you have the new law for everyone from 1997. So if France has stolen objects, but only since 1997, you can get them back. So there are very specific laws, and you can make no parallel between what happened with the Jewish community in Europe during Second World War. You can't make any parallel with African restitution. So that's why I'm being very careful and maybe a bit boring in my way of speaking only of Benin, but I don't want to give other example that would make people think that it's the same history.
Thank you. That's very clear. Thank you. Not boring. In no way. This is a question from a staff member. Is it better to keep your patrimony or heritage yourself, even if it risks destruction due to lack of funding, war, graft, etc., than to be kept in a well-funded, relatively safe, protected situation somewhere else? I guess my question is it worth the risk, even if the item has a shorter life? I think about all the objects in Afghanistan, Syria, and Iraq looted or destroyed by ISIS and others and lost to the world.
I understand the question, and that's why I said, people are asking it a lot because of the Congo-Kinshasa losing the object that had been given back in 1974. I think we have very protective law of heritage here. So are people gonna work with this law? I hope. We haven't tried since our independence, so we don't know. We don't really protect any heritage today, but because our heritage is in Paris, so why build a brand new museum when you have nothing to put in there? So, which is not totally true, because actually you could buy contemporary artist work and try to show it to the population. So it's we could have done that, and we didn't do it at the beginning. But at the beginning, you have to remember we are 60 years old, and 60 years old when we were independent, we had everything to build, because contrarily to what people think, colonization didn't bring that much. So we had to face important changes. We were 1 million in 1960, we are 12 million today. Everything changed. We had to create everything. Colonization left us with almost nothing. There was one university for Western Africa in Dakar for 5,000 students. So I don't know if you imagine, but we're tens of millions today. So we were with nothing in 1960, so heritage was not the priority. It is today. We are poor, obviously. We're in one of the poorest countries in the world, but our budget is okay. I mean, we're not especially. We don't have very big financial problems. We are very poor, but we have hope and we have a future. So obviously, I think we're gonna show the world that it's one of our priorities. We have the means to do it. And well, the rich funded Western museum, their countries need what we have in Africa. I mean, they're here to do business. The French companies, they still work in Africa. They still take our oil, they take our uranium, they take a lot of things. So, well, maybe those rich funded companies will be happy to help us and fund us if we have any material problems to keep our heritage. We're gonna see, we're gonna invent solutions. I think civil society is very concerned, and this is key. If people are concerned, you can't do anything you want with the heritage. Now people are very aware of what's happening. It's not the population of Congo in 1975. Today it's 21st century. People are expecting to see those objects. They're conscious about what's happening. So I think yeah, we can't just stop these objects from coming just because we fear what we might do.
Forgive me, I know that we sort of move from topic to topic as we go through and integrate all the questions together. So this is another question from a faculty member. Does your dual identity as both French and Beninese give you an advantage in negotiating the return of Benin art from France? Is that a phenomenon of post-colonial history?
No, I don't think. I think people in France mostly hate me because, you know, African museums are not very happy to see me come. The most important one is the Museum of the Quai Branly. I've kind of understood that they have voodoo dolls where they put pins saying my name every time they hear me say that they should give back and that we should get our heritage back. No, I don't think it gives me any special advantage. I can speak about the subject being French, because as a French person, I think we have to look at our national collections and think about them and their future and why we have those objects and are they really legitimate in France? I think as a French person, I'm allowed to raise the question. And for Benin, let's say, yeah, I'm quite legitimate in Benin because I'm working in the field and I have a museum and I've received these objects and I think young people listen to what I have to say on the subject because they've been coming to the foundation for years, and so they are interested. They know what culture can bring to them, and so I think today it's being French and Beninese. It doesn't allow me to do anything really because it's only a state-to-state. It's only a state-to-state relationship. It's the state of France speaking to the state of Benin. Nobody is really speaking to me. I am mostly speaking in the social media and in the press because nobody wants to speak about it loudly, so I do it. But I have no part in. I have no part in the process except the advocacy.
This is a question from a faculty member. Are there opportunities for regional or international collaboration here? This faculty member has in mind the African Union, the Economic Community of West African States, UNESCO, or are these issues fundamentally national in character?
Well, the African Union has said 3 weeks ago that culture would be one of its focus for the year 2021. But I think they don't really have anyone caring about culture in their administration. So we didn't really get what they were meaning because they said it, they wrote it, but we don't really know what it means because we haven't really seen African Union taking any part in this debate. I think UNESCO would have a role to play, but they are not really speaking about it. And we never hear Audrey Azoulay, the French director, speaking about it. I think personally she's very happy about the restitutions, but she never said it publicly or whatever. So it's complicated. For the moment, it's very national because even though Benin asked and the French president said it's possible and let's open the dialogue with all the countries who want. Only 7 countries have asked for the return of looted objects. Only 7. So it's been on the table for the 4 last years, and not so many countries are asking. So for the moment, it's not international. It's really national. It's France and Senegal, France and Benin, France and Ethiopia, France and Ivory Coast, Mali, Madagascar, but that's it.
Why do you think that is, that only 7 countries are asking?
Well, some countries have difficulty. I mean, if you're in South Sudan, I'm sure heritage is not the question. The question is how do you get power? How do you get a hospital? How do you create roads? Which is not the case for everyone. But some countries have emergencies, vital emergencies. So obviously those countries are not really into the heritage questions. Some countries are have been have presidents that have not had any access to culture and maybe are not really sensitive about the question because they, as children or as young people, they haven't been exposed to museum. So some of them are just, not asking, and some of them have diplomatical issues. It's very specific. Once again, it's I think Togo is not asking anything either to Germany or France. I think France has almost nothing from Togo, but they're not asking anything to Germany, and they've never raised the subject, neither in the media or in the politics. It's our next door neighbor, and they have never heard about it. But they almost have no museums. It's something that doesn't exist. It's not a question. So, and here, you just cross the border, and here everyone speaks about it. And when I went to fill the tank of my car, the guy from the oil station told me, oh, thank you so much. I heard you got the objects back. It's really good. I think my children will come to the museum and see them. And, it's not even done, but the guy just heard that we've done it and that he can come and see them to the museum next week.
This is, we're really in our last minute, so I hope you'll allow me to slide another question in very quickly. It's from a student. What are your thoughts on the possibilities of using new technologies to display cultural heritage artifacts as 3D models or in virtual reality? Do you think that would be a way to display the objects of heritage while the current owners are unwilling to give them back?
Well, I think what would be very interesting, because as French museums say, they're encyclopedic and they need to show our collection. I think what would be really interesting is to do 3D copies and put them in France and send the original back. Because for the French people, it would allow them to discover our art. And for us, it would be our history and dignity back. So I'm very much in favor of 3D copies. And I think they've just done it with the Noces de Cana in Venice, but they did a 3D copy and sent it back to Venice and kept it in the Louvre. I think that was the wrong way. I think something got wrong in that history. I think they should have kept the 3D copy and then sent back to Venice the proper painting. So I think we could use it, but maybe in the other way.
The other direction, perhaps. Thank you. I know that we must respect your time, and so it's important that we conclude. Thank you so much for all of this information and for these responses today. It was really a pleasure to have you here. We're very fortunate. Thank you.
I didn't see a lot of you, but I hope I hope you had that I was
very engaged and very appreciative. So yes, thank you very much. And I'll remind everybody else who's here that students who have questions about submitting a Common Hour proposal for next fall can hop on the Zoom chat right now. And everybody else, we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you, Marie-Cécile Zinsou. Enjoy your dinner.